Hi, my name is Christopher Buford, and I did my final project on the ancient Romans, more specifically, their art, the culture that influenced said art, and how they influenced the cultures they colonized during their reign. During this first section, I'll be speaking about Roman art and why it is so beautifully Greek. Alexander the Great was one of the greatest war generals of all time. He created a vast empire that stretched from Macedonia to Egypt and from Greece to part of India. During his reign, he coined a term called Hellenization, which was the spreading of knowledge and culture of the Greek people. His tactics would be guidelines for future war generals and the reign of Rome. Here is how the Romans were affected by the Greeks. Romans were totally enamored by the Greeks and their culture. They studied their mythology, teachings, and art incessantly. They valued Greek art so much that eventually all the original art that was done by the Romans were replaced with Greek versions. Romans would take Greek mythology and put a humorous, dark twist on the art that would come from those stories. Here we have pictured the Greek god Marsyas, who was a musician, same as Apollo, but here we have him being tortured or being flayed by Apollo. This is a Greek piece done, but the Romans would take a piece like this and would have him placed on the handle of a knife, something that Marsyas would have been flayed with at that time. So they would do little funny things like that to everyday pieces. Also, the Greeks were focused on capturing realism within their pieces, while Romans would focus mainly on the portrayal of power within their work. So the Greeks were known for their beautiful anatomy and, soft poses and whatnot, but the Romans would focus mainly on how the clothes would fit, drapery, and powerful poses of like pointing offwards into the distance, stating that the Romans are powerful and just a force to be reckoned with at this time. The Romans would also commission Greek artists to create portraits for them. They would also request that in those same portraits that they would sport a Greek philosopher beard. Within the Greek culture, that was a distinguished badge of honor, and the Romans knew that. So a lot of the times they would be depicted with that very same beard. Here we have the Roman ruler Hadrian, and he was known as the Philhellene, which was a lover of all things Greek, same like Alexander the Great and the other Roman rulers before him. Now we're going to be looking at some of the native art during the colonization of the Roman Empire. I just wanted to provide some context behind the first ruler of the Roman Empire. So Augustus Caesar started the Roman Empire after his adopted father, Julius Caesar, was brutally murdered in 27 BCE. He was the sole ruler and controlled the Roman army during that time. Augustus was seen as a descendant of the gods, specifically Venus, and here we have him portrayed in his war uniform, and we see a little Cupid on the side, just kind of as a subtle, well, not so subtle reminder to those watching and staring at this statue that he is a descendant of a god, Venus. Here we have some pre-Roman sarcophagus painting or some funerary art. During the reign of the Romans in Egypt, one of the main influences we can see change within the Egyptian culture is their portrayal of their mummy portraits. Here we have a classic sarcophagus that everybody knows and loves. Ancient Greeks and ancient Romans loved seeing these pieces done as well. They would implement it in their own things. And this was created using a style called cartonnage, which was basically a paper mache, just a bunch of fabric glued together and then painted on top using not necessarily frescoes, but using pigment and whatnot. And they would display their gods within here. So there's multiple figures within this piece, Ankh symbols on the bottom, and things like that, just kind of ushering this person into the afterlife. And we can see that, this is what we know and love within the Egyptian culture. Here we have an example of how the Romans would influence Egyptian funerary art. We have a Fayum portrait here where we see stark differences between the two styles of mummy paintings. The piece done before had multiple figures in profile views, standing sideways, and here we have one person, frontally faced, and it's only from the chest up. These pieces were done on wood and then attached to upper middle class mummies during the Roman period. Um, this is typical of the Greco-Roman style. We see swooping lines within her eyes and her eyebrows, and we also see intricate clothing and details within the piece. And it indicates that this person was very important during that time. We don't really see jewels and jewelry displayed on earlier mummy pieces in Egypt, but here we do. During my search for the Fayum portraits, I found this image of Septimus Severus that I'd like to talk about today too. This is a portrait of him and his family. This is done, in a typical Fayum mummy portrait style, but this was made on a visit to Egypt. So he wasn't dead yet, and he didn't rule Egypt as well. So this shows that this style was highly revered amongst other hierarchy people. Here we have the classic style, the classic Greco-Roman style, swooping eyebrows, nice soft features, but also Roman influences are very prevalent. He's in a war general outfit. He looks regal. Him and his whole family look regal here. I also wanted to talk about how the use of skin tone represents age within this culture. So the father is depicted having darker skin tone, normally shows that he's wise. There's white cut into his beard, really trying to give up that he's older. That means he's been through more things and that he's a wise ruler. And his other members of his family are depicted in white or in a lighter skin tone, which means that they're very youthful or just beauty in those regards. I just love this piece because there's a lore behind why the other child is scratched out or erased. His firstborn, depicted right under Septimus Severus, was eventually came to power and then killed his brother, and subsequently he had him erased from history. So any image that had a picture of his brother, he had scraped off and blotted out so that it just depicted him and his family. In conclusion, the Romans were a complex people that found beauty in other cultures and sought to understand and implement those ideas into their own lives, even if that meant conquering them in order to do so. Egyptians are one of the few civilizations that were under the power of the Romans, but their stark before and after images were too incredible for me to not solely put my focus on them. Even I am starting to feel the looming effect of Rome in my own work.